Hello, everyone. This is Parrish Alford with the Daily Journal. I'm joined by Logan Lowery, our Mississippi State beat writer, and this is Double Coverage, a production of the Daily Journal, all things Mississippi State and Ole Miss for the next half hour or so. Lots to talk about in the program, even in a transitional time of year. Football games are finished for Ole Miss. They're almost finished for Mississippi State, but Jesus said, football you have with you always. So there's always something to write about there. We'll talk some basketball too. Logan, how are you, man?
Doing good. I'm actually enjoying this week, getting a little bit of a breather after the grind that we've been in since late July, and trying to the basketball team's been on the road for the majority of this week, so actually getting a chance to catch my breath a little bit, just go to a few press conferences, and I had one basketball game earlier in the week, but as of right now, things are pretty smooth, and looking forward to kind of an easy weekend, hopefully.
I'll tell you what, Logan, there's something to be said for the routine of football season. I do like the routine. It lets you plan a little bit and maybe run out of town and see the kids. We did that quite a bit, or I was able to do that with different games in different places. So, not all is bad with the grind, but it's different, man, when you take away the regular responsibilities of football. Logan, speaking of football, man, we got athletics directors from two schools that have been summoned to the principal's office in Birmingham at a date yet to be announced. Ross Bjork of Ole Miss and John Cohen of MSU will meet with SEC Commissioner Greg Sankey, and the topic will be the Egg Bowl. Logan, there was that vibe right before the game that with the personalities of Joe Moorhead at Mississippi State and Matt Luke at Ole Miss, that we might have a more civil rivalry, a kinder, gentler Egg Bowl. But it didn't turn out that way in the game. And, of course, the fight, that must have been the longest fight, Logan. I think that was longer than 1997. Were you at the 97 game?
No, I've actually just seen the clips of the 97 game. And if I win, I arrived after after the fight had already happened. I think it took place pre-game. I've just seen that old YouTube clip with that ESPN has, the old blurry digital type of clip. But yeah, I've seen that one. So I don't really know how some of that clip they slow it down so you can see everything. So I don't really know how long it lasted. But yeah, it took a while for them to restore order last week. That's for sure.
It really did. There were little skirmishes off to the side and pockets of action and whatnot. And I can say that I've never seen unsportsmanlike conduct assessed to every player on both teams. That was interesting. But maybe, Logan, we talk about it like this because it's become somewhat of an anticipated thing with the Egg Bowl, but usually more just pushing and shoving and finger pointing and things like that. I thought last year in Starkville, that was about the extent of it. You could see that words were being exchanged, but there were no physical blows, no bench clearing or anything like we witnessed this season. But Greg Sankey was at the game. He said he's had enough. He wants to talk to these ADs. And Ross Bjork talked about that on Monday of this week and says he has number one, he said he's kind of promoted this type of conversation before, but it hasn't gotten off the ground. Ross just kind of glazed over the top of several different opinions in this interview, but didn't really offer a lot of specifics for anything. He said he has a long list of things he would like to discuss with the commissioner, and the list is getting longer. The first thing I thought about, Logan, was the Seinfeld episode with the airing of grievances, at the Festivus celebration. But anyway, look, as far as a civil tone in this rivalry, I do believe that these head coaches are guys who will help bring this series to that point. But I think there is a lot of bad blood right now with the NCAA investigation and Mississippi State's role in that. And that's still just too fresh in the minds. That's too close in the past, and it's not surprising that you would see something like we saw in the game. I do think that that the coach. I think the coaches set the tone, Logan. I mean, you could take these ads to Birmingham, and you can have this big discussion, and they'll have lunch, and Greg Sankey will pay for it, and and there'll be some serious discussions. But nothing will change if the ads do not come back and effectively communicate to these coaches, hey guys, we're going to clean this up, and this is what you're going to do to get us there, because it has to come from the coaches. These guys set the tone in this rivalry, and whatever they say and however they behave will have an effect on their players. And I think it will take some time to get there. But I would imagine you would see a difference next year. But, it's going to come from the coaches. It's not going to come just because the ads went to Birmingham and talked together about the rivalry. But anyway, I know you haven't had a chance to speak with Cohen yet. I know when we talked with Bjork on Monday, he kept saying, you guys see the same things I do. And, we pressed him a little further, and he would not offer specifics. I'm taking that to mean the NCAA investigation and the immunity granted to Kobe Jones and Leo Lewis, MSU players, and and just the different things that came out of their interviews with the NCAA. But Logan, I don't know what you can do with this rivalry other than get on these coaches and say, look, guys, you will be the impetus for change. That's where it has to start. I know you haven't had a chance to, or have you had a chance to talk with John Cohen at all?
I haven't. The only time I've seen John was Monday night after the Alcorn State basketball game, and I was on deadline, so I didn't have any time to jump up and talk. It was actually after the press conference of that, so I actually went back out courtside to finish up my story, and John was standing out there talking, and I didn't have a chance to catch him, before I had to meet deadline. It was either go talk to him or miss deadline, one of the two. So that, I chose the one that was going to keep my job in the short run for that. So did that, but I don't know how much is going to be accomplished. I mean, this rivalry, these two schools have hated each other long before you and I were born, before Bjork and Cohen were born. I mean, they're going to hate each other always. This is not a new thing. I mean, it's just, I don't know how much they can actually accomplish going to Birmingham and sitting down and talking, and I do think, the head coach has set the tone, but, Joe Moorhead's tone after that game was a whole lot different than it was going into the game. And I don't think he knew a whole lot about the rivalry going in. And he kind of talked about that after the game. He said that he had Nick Fitzgerald and Gary Green talk to the team before the game about the emotions and the rivalry, because he just didn't know, it was his first time experiencing it. So he didn't have any background to speak on as far as this particular rivalry. So he had the players go up and do it. And so they talked about, less than 30 seconds apiece, but they got the message across to the team. And, Joe Moorhead was definitely introduced to it, with the third quarter fight. And then after the game, there was some dust ups after the game. And, a lot of it had to do with Mississippi State planting their flag at the 50-yard line of the field, which is the same thing Ole Miss did a year ago in Starkville. They planted the flag at midfield, so Mississippi State returned the favor. Some Ole Miss players tried to snatch the flag out of the hands. Some Ole Miss personnel. I was actually on the field and saw most of that. I was, not too far from where all that took place, and there was a lot of Ole Miss staff with their chest poked out and I guess trying to defend their field. There was one particular guy. It was a big I don't know his name. It was a big muscular black guy that was on the Ole Miss staff trying to fight with Mark McLaurin of Mississippi State. It was bad, and Joe Moorhead was trying to get him off the field. Somebody, in his words, popped off the hinge exchange. John Cohen had to get him off the field, and Joe Moorhead was asked about it after the game, and what all took place. And, he said that basically, he teaches his team to play with class and pride and all those things and, show respect to the game. He said, but we're also not going to take anybody's shit either. So, that's just kind of the way he put it. So I think he was, introduced the rivalry in that way. And, I think things will change next year, and I don't know if they'll change for the better.
Well, we'll see. Hey, shifting gears a little bit, I know State is looking for where it will play in a bowl game. Staff news at Ole Miss this week. Wesley McGriff, the defensive coordinator, was fired right after the Egg Bowl. The morning after, Matt Luke did not want to address staff change in his post-game press conference, but he addressed it very quickly on Friday morning after the Egg Bowl with the firing of Wesley McGriff, which was kind of anticipated. Uh, look, there were a lot of injuries on the Ole Miss defense this season. There wasn't a lot of talent to start with, and you start taking out starters. About 5 starters that had started at least one game who were gone with season-ending injuries. Now, these weren't like all-conference players, Logan, but they were starters. They were the best at that position for Ole Miss. You take them away, it makes a difference. But at the end of the day, the defense was McGriff's responsibility, and for 2 years it looked the same, and it was not a good look. So the fact that there would be a change there, not surprising at all. Different names have been floated around right now. I don't get the sense that this is necessarily going to be a quick hire for Matt Luke. It might be. That early signing day is coming up December 19th. He would like to have a defensive coordinator in place by then, but that's not a guarantee. And he said that he will take a slower approach and make sure he has the right fit. A few names that have been tossed about: Jay Bateman, the defensive coordinator at Army; Pete Golding, an assistant coach at Alabama, younger guy. Brian Brown, a younger guy, but he's only been a coordinator one season. Former Ole Miss player, Corinth native, outstanding athlete at Corinth, and a defensive back at Ole Miss. Has had a really good year as defensive coordinator at Appalachian State after 6 years as cornerbacks coach. So still not a big body of work there as defensive coordinator. Another guy to keep an eye on, which I think makes a lot of sense, would be former Colorado coach Mike McIntyre, who was fired in November or earlier this month. McIntyre is a former Ole Miss assistant, but he's been a lot of other places, or I should say he's had a lot of success since he left Ole Miss as defensive coordinator at Duke, which helped him get the job at San Jose State, where he turned that program into a winner, which is not an easy thing there at San Jose. Didn't get it done at Colorado. Had one big season, got a contract extension. That was in 2016. They went 10-4. Played in the conference championship game, but just didn't. He wasn't able to make that success stick, and he's cut his teeth on the defensive side. He coached defensive backs at Ole Miss, was a good recruiter. I could see him being, a good candidate as this moves along. Offensively, Logan, Phil Longo, the offensive coordinator, interviewed for the Texas State head coaching job, did not get it. They hired Jake Spavital of West Virginia. West Virginia's offensive coordinator. But Luke told us on Monday that several teams had expressed interest in Phil Longo. I'm hearing UMass being one of those. But I don't get the vibe that there's going to be a change. Phil Longo may leave because he sees a better opportunity somewhere. But just based on what Luke had to say about his offense on Monday, look, the red zone issues are clear. Okay, I went back and looked at 4 SEC losses for Ole Miss, not counting Mississippi State and Alabama, where they really didn't have many red zone opportunities to speak of. But when you go back and look at games against LSU, Auburn, not South Carolina, LSU, Auburn, Vanderbilt, and one other one where
South Carolina.
What's that?
It was South Carolina.
It wasn't South Carolina. They had 8 red zone opportunities against South Carolina.
Okay.
It was Auburn. You look at LSU, Auburn, Vanderbilt, and Texas A&M games. They had like 18 red zone opportunities and had 4 touchdowns. I don't have the numbers in front of me. I believe that's it. Very, very close to that. Just a terrible percentage. You can't win games like that. So the red zone issues are there. They're real. They put a lot of focus on them in the open date and came back against South Carolina and did better. But in addition to having those, kicking short field goals in those games late in the season, they were turning the ball over down there. They had, they had one red zone turnover against Texas A&M, but you had turnovers against South Carolina and Vanderbilt that were just outside the red zone, like they were inside the 25. You can't do that and win games in the SEC. Luke says he recognizes this. He said, quote, I know what good red zone offense looks like, and we're going to get this fixed. So we'll see. But I don't think that you have to fire Phil Longo to get it fixed. And I think, the vibe that I get is that he may leave somewhere on his own. But, if another opportunity does not present itself, I think Phil Longo will be the offensive coordinator at Ole Miss next season. A little surprised, Logan, at the backlash that he's getting. It's the red zone is something they've got to fix, but it's not like there is not success in other areas. To me, it's a much bigger problem if you can't get to the red zone. And Ole Miss got to the red zone against everyone except Alabama and Mississippi State. So against some pretty good defenses, they put themselves in position to score, but did not get the touchdowns they needed to have. So staff change, still an ongoing thing at Ole Miss. Every time we approached that subject with Luke, he came back with, well, you're in a constant state of evaluation. You're always evaluating. So we'll see. You would like some stability for that early signing date. I know that plays into it, and what kind of movement happens after that. I just think this is going to be an ongoing thing for a while. So tell us about State in a bowl game, Logan. What did Texas A&M's win over LSU mean to State in the bowl picture?
It clouded it up a little bit more than it already previously was. I mean, most of the projections going into the final week had Mississippi State. Most of them had Mississippi State going to the Outback Bowl in Tampa, and that kind of clouded things up. Even though Mississippi State beat Texas A&M, I believe Texas A&M finished ahead of Mississippi State in the standings. If I, haven't really looked at them, I think that's what took place. But obviously Texas A&M has a huge alumni base, and I think that kind of moved them up in the bowl to the forefront of the bowl ahead of Mississippi State in the bowl selection process. So I've seen everything kind of. Right now for Mississippi State, the Outback Bowl is still a possibility. Music City Bowl is a possibility. Texas Bowl is a possibility. Belk Bowl, Liberty Bowl. It's kind of the whole gambit there. I think the main three, in my opinion, kind of be the Outback Bowl, the Music City Bowl, and the Texas Bowl. I think those are the main three. And also, you get the Citrus Bowl has been mentioned as well for Mississippi State. I don't know that they can get to that one or not. I think that one might be the fourth, out of them. But it's kind of any ball game, anybody's ball game right now. I don't know how everything's going to fall out or shake out on Sunday, but I'm anxious to find out where they're going, because I need to make plans to not only to be down there for a week, make all my travel arrangements, but I also have to make plans here at home to, hey, when are we going to have Christmas? Because, the last 3 years we've had to kind of work Christmas around my schedule. One year I missed Christmas entirely when Mississippi State went to the St. Petersburg Bowl. We'd have like Christmas, the 17th or something, really early before I traveled down there. And then the two Christmases on each side of that, I've had to leave out Christmas afternoon and hit the road. So, we've had to make sure we had all the Christmas done prior to, Christmas afternoon, so I could hit the road and travel somewhere. And I tell you what, I don't know if you've traveled on Christmas, Parrish. There's not a whole lot of gas stations open. There's not a whole lot of places to stop as far as restaurants and stuff. So I remember last year I drove down to Tallahassee on my way to Jacksonville and had a little bag full of like finger sandwiches and stuff that was left over from Christmas. And I would just kind of reach over and grab one and pop it in my mouth, because there was nowhere to stop really. So and then I traveled to Tallahassee, spent the night, and then finished off my trip to Jacksonville because State had practice the morning of the 26th, and kind of the same thing for the Belk Bowl that I went to. Drove north of Atlanta, spent the night, and finished out the trip on to Charlotte the next morning because they practiced in Charlotte on the 26th. So, and I don't know how Joe Moorhead does his bowl practices, and that's kind of another thing I'm waiting to see. I was used to those 8 years that Dan Mullen went to bowls. I knew how he did bowl practices, how he the beginning bowl practices, he would start off with the young guys, the guys that were redshirt, and the guys that just didn't play that much during that season. That first week was all about them. The veteran guys would stand around at practice while those guys got the majority of the reps, and then they would practice one full week in Starkville with the veterans, and then they would go down to the bowl site and finish out things down there. So we'll have to kind of see how what Joe Moorhead's schedule is like. Dan Mullen opened up a lot of his bowl practices. So far, Joe Moorhead has opened up portions of his spring practice, and that's been it. I think we had a couple of opportunities to go out at the beginning of fall practice, kind of right before they got in pads, to watch a few portions of practice. But that was about it. So we haven't really seen practice since the first week of August. So, it could be a whole new experience, when bowl practices get underway, just finally getting a chance to see these guys practice again.
Logan, we got a few minutes left. Tell us about basketball.
Yeah, Mississippi State plummeted 10 spots with their one loss that they had last week to Arizona State. They fell from 15 all the way to 25, nearly fell out of the top 25. But in that ball game against Arizona State, State shot the ball poorly from three-point range to start the game and fell behind, I think, by like 15 points or so, and battled all the way back, tied the game with less than a minute to go. And then Arizona State hits a three with 29 seconds left, ends up winning that ball game. State's won 2 games since then. One of them out in Las Vegas in that tournament that they lost to Arizona State in, and then they beat Alcorn State Monday night here at home. They're 5-1 on the year. They actually have a big road game coming up in Dayton on Friday. Mississippi State barely beat Dayton here in Starkville last year, I think by 2 points. So it was a close game here in Starkville. They'll go to Dayton, one of the toughest venues in college basketball to play in. They'll have 10 to 13,000 fans in there, packed in there. It'll be a raucous environment. Mississippi State's first true road game of the season. So it'll be something those freshmen get to experience for the first time. Reggie Perry and Robert Woodard, they'll get indoctrinated into what playing on the road in college basketball is like. And I think they're looking forward to it, and Ben Howland said they scheduled this game for that very reason. He said this is be close to an SEC environment as he can create during the non-conference portion. So they're using this as kind of a measuring stick to get them used to playing on the road in the SEC, because those games are going to come and they're going to matter. So this will be a huge kind of a measuring stick for this team, and also help their it's not RPI anymore, Parrish. It's some kind of other metric.
Net rankings.
Yeah, they're doing something different this year. And Ben Howland was asked about that yesterday at his press conference, and he said I don't know how they came up with this formula. It's supposed to help us, but he said I don't understand it. So he said all I know is if you win, you're going to get in the tournament.
Well, Ole Miss had a nice win last night against San Diego, 93-86 at the Pavilion. San Diego is one of those very good teams that most people around here haven't heard of. Very athletic, good ball movement, good skill level, and a solid win. When they went into that game, I became familiar a little bit with the net rankings, because San Diego was ranked far ahead of Ole Miss at 69. It's fluctuated a little bit during the week. When we started on Monday, Ole Miss was 93 and San Diego was 65. By the time the game came around, I think they had dropped to 69 and Ole Miss was up to 87, something like that. So getting a little familiar with those net rankings, maybe if Ole Miss wins enough games like this, that will matter. Of course, the Rebels were picked last in the SEC. They're actually not playing last. They're playing pretty well right now. And I think these guys look to be coachable. They look like they are trying to do the things that Kermit Davis, their first-year coach, is asking them to do. Certainly not a first-year coach to coaching, but new coach at Ole Miss after a 16-year successful run at Middle Tennessee and other spots before that. So anyway, one of the things he's trying to get out of this bunch, Logan, is defense, and I do think you see that more. You see more of an awareness for players. Doesn't mean they're good at it all the time. And I thought that last night, San Diego made them look bad in spots, particularly in man defense. They were able to beat some of those guys. Ole Miss is still struggling to guard in the post. The bigs with Bruce Stevens and Dominique Olenichek just aren't very good defensively right now, and that's a weak spot on this team. And sometimes you'll see KJ Buffin, a freshman, very athletic, move to that 5 where he's pretty undersized. He can't stay there a long time, but he is 6'7", and he's athletic enough to play that and guard some of those bigs a little bit. But thing about last night was you saw Terrence Davis really work at getting to the rim, and that's kind of a goal for him this week. The Rebels' most athletic player did not score against Cincinnati. Ole Miss went to the beach last week in Gainesville, Florida, right down there by Destin, a neutral site event. They beat Baylor, lost to Cincinnati, competed in the second half against Cincinnati, even had a lead there in the second half, but that game eventually got out of hand, and Cincinnati really pulled away at the free throw line. But in that game, Terrence Davis did not score. He took 6 shots. 5 of them were three-pointers. So there was a real emphasis Wednesday night. And again, when the Rebels play Saturday at 1 against Louisiana Monroe, the alma mater, they want to see Terrence Davis get to the rim, get to the free throw line, and take most of his shots in the paint. And that's what he did against San Diego. He was 8 for 14 overall, but he was 7 for 10 in the paint, had 20 points. And when he's there, he's not only shooting, he's passing more. And he had a career-high 9 assists. 5 players in double figures for Ole Miss against San Diego. 2 of them, freshman Blake Henson and the freshman Buffin, really stood out. And they've been waiting for Henson to have a double-figure game and do something other than shoot threes. And I think we saw him take a step against San Diego. Maybe that will continue. Folks, that's it for this edition of Double Coverage, a production of the Daily Journal. We thank you for clicking in with us today. Be sure and come back and join us next week for another round. We'll be talking Mississippi State and Ole Miss once again.